Big red button pressed. Thank you, Kevin. Small group, so please interrupt if you have any questions. If you're working on, if you have a module idea, like we can dive into that a little bit. But left on my own, I will blow through my 100 slides. All right. This is when there's not a module for that, how to make and potentially maintain a new module. My name is Ben Nellinson. I am part of Agaric Technology Collective. We've been around since 2006, so 20 years this June. And we are presenting when there's not a module for that, how to make and maintain a new Drupal module. In a keynote at New England Drupal Camp, Jason Pimental gave a great summary of the most useful qualification for making most anything worthwhile, the propensity to be dissatisfied by not understanding something, but not discouraged by not understanding something. And so I am presenting, but with a lot of help from fellow Agaric worker owners of the cooperative, Mauricio Donarte, Chris Thompson, and Keegan Rankin. And then David Valdez, who is left the co-op, but is still doing Drupal stuff elsewhere. And I will keep giving these presentations until someone gives the presentation I need, how to stop making modules. I have more than 100 modules on Drupal.org, which I guess is my qualification here. All right, you can find us on the Fediverse and more on that. I'm doing another session next on how to post from your site to Blue Sky and Mastodon and Facebook. And yeah, send complaints to me and heckling posts to me. All right. So what do you do when there's not a module for that? You make your own. It's easy. You've been creating a site where people can relive great literature inspired by a famine, soon to be topical again. You've already created an excellent content type under structured content. This is just site building. But you don't feel that the save button really communicates what you want it to when you're creating Frankenstein content. I wanted to say something a little punchier. All right, so I'm going to make a module. All you need is one file that tells Drupal about the module, a .info.yaml file. The first part of the file is the first part of the name is the name of your module. It should be the same as the folder that it is in. And then you just one more file, and shown the old school way, a .module file, but that's still the simplest, a .info file, a .info.yaml, and a .module file. And this is enough for Drupal to see what you want. This is a specific form alter hook, Frankenstein form node, Frankenstein form alter, which is your module name and then the name of the hook. And this is a hook for a specific form name, so the name of the form is node Frankenstein form. It is a form alter hook for that form. And then overriding a submit value. And where you put it is in, if you're, it's a custom module, goes in modules, custom, and then the name of your module in your project base. And here we go. No change. So make sure you're not reloading a screenshot over and over. Clear cache 3 times, look to the heavens. Still nothing. Right, enable your module. Go to admin modules or use drush and then drush-y or drush-en if you don't want it. If you want it to ask you, but enabling a module is usually safe, so -y just tells drush to go ahead and do what you asked it to. This is probably the most important slide. After you put some custom code, enable your module. Ba-ba! Reanimate as the word for save, instead of replacing the word save. And now you know how to make a module. Anyone want to do anything else for the next 40 minutes? So yeah, you're thinking that's easy if you know exact words and symbols to put in that file. And yeah, you're absolutely right. So we're going to go on into how you can figure all of that out. So Drupal has been compared to a box of Legos that you can build just about anything you want with, but sometimes those Legos have been put together for you. The online, commerce ecosystem is a whole bunch of modules doing a whole bunch of power. You could, get a recipe for a music media gallery, but this talk is about when the module you need has not been assembled, just a bunch of pieces. But the good news is a few basic approaches give a lot of power. But first two secrets. First the good news and then the bad news. The good news is now you know where to paste. So like if you find information anywhere, you know where to paste it. And Stack Overflow has the site that has been helping people exit Vim for a decade now. Also, there's Drupal things. There's lots and lots of information all over the internet. And knowing where to put the code is going to unleash a lot of power for you. And module making is not a mystic domain. Everyone can do it. And then the bad news is that simple form alter already had a bunch of gotchas. Biggest one was how to actually override the save form, and that override the action button. And for that, you really need either to know it or to be looking through with the debugger. But also, it only applies to the node add form, not the edit form. And then, as I went into, there's a dozen variations of the humble form alter, and they're all valid. In the case of the reanimate statement, that makes more sense when you're creating the node than when you're saving it. So we left it at that. But you'd actually have to do two hooks or have a conditional in the hook in order to apply to both the node add and the edit form. All right. So what we're going to do, what we just did was how to make a module as a prelude. Act 1 will be how not to make a module. Act 2 will be how not to have to make a whole module. And Act 3, the main part, how to figure out how to make a module. And finally, the encore, how to contribute your module. All right. So I would say that the hierarchy of code usage in Drupal is ideally you can just use Drupal core code. And next, you need to use broadly supported contributed module code, which you're almost going to do all the time. Path auto is still in contrib, not in core. Less supported or patch contributed code is third tier, and you just stop as soon as you can do the rest with configuration. In most cases is the best option. And then next tier, code you write and contribute, and the lowest tier is custom code you write and hide from the world. And we'll go into reasons to contribute later. And so when not to make a module, when there's an easier way. So alternatives to a module that are still in the space of customizing, obviously if you find a module that already does it or you can configure it, but template overrides is frequently what you want to do if you're trying to change the look of something. A string override if you just want to change the wording on a site. Sometimes the string is specific enough or has context that you can override just what you want. In the case of that save button, it would have overridden save on every module and not just that one. But if that was your goal, is to change it to submit instead of save, you could do that with a string override. No need for a module. And then ECA is events condition action. It is a module or more a suite of module that is really the successor to rules. Rules does have so the idea is if you use if this then that or anything that just lets you click things together, this is a very structured way to react to an event, given a certain condition, take an action. And it's a bit more structured to the old rules module, which was the same idea though, that, and again, rules module is available in modern Drupal again, and I just like ECA's approach better, but it's letting you click together in the interface things that would usually be conditional logic inside a module. And that's not necessarily faster than getting it into code. More the advantage of using something like ECA is that the logic flow is more evident to a non-developer. Like it creates a diagram of what is happening. All right. So obviously, is there already a module for that? And you can go directly to drupal.org/project/project_module, or see which menu they've hidden it today. I usually update this every talk. It's usually moved a little bit. I have not checked if you go to the main menu, build with Drupal, and then modules, but it's always going to be there somewhere. But it's always at that URL, drupal.org/project/project_module. So there's thousands and thousands of modules, even filtering just to one. So I recommend that you change the core compatibility to something reasonable, like Drupal 10 to start, because those are going to be the best modules that are supported by modern Drupal. So you go with the version of Drupal that is the lowest version of Drupal that's still supported. So Drupal 10 is still supported. You can also use Drupal 11, but most of the modules there's going to be more modules supporting Drupal 10. But then you can filter just for Drupal 11, because there'll be a few modules that only support Drupal 11. And then if you're not finding anything when you're putting in keywords and searching for the type of module you're trying to build, you can remove the version entirely, because your best bet might be porting an existing module. And use lots of different keywords and write all your keywords down. And you can do the same searches on an internet-wide search with Drupal and module included as keywords. If you haven't disabled AI summaries, it will frequently helpfully pop up with imagining the same module you're looking for and telling you it exists. Which can get you very excited for a moment. But and then you can ask in Drupal Slack channels, #support, #general, and #contribute. Get connected to Slack. That is where most of the community is in Slack. You can also kick it old school and see who is in IRC. The equivalent channels are Drupal-support, #Drupal, and #Drupal-contribute. But I just do it in that order: support, general, and contribute. And you can space it out even over a few days, so you're not spamming the forum, but there's a good chance for people to do it. So, as we all know, when building a Drupal site, there's a module for that. It can be the sweetest words you can hear. But if all that searching turns up nothing, you get to be the one who will make those sweetest words able to be said. Like I said, take note of every word you use when searching for a module. This is how people in the same situation will find your module. So you just want to get all those keywords, in a blog post of your own or on the module page when you create it. So if you find a module that almost does exactly what you want, you can contribute a patch, or if it's not in modern Drupal yet, you can port it. And in both cases, most module maintainers prefer issue forks, and that is a link to sort of a easier guide to doing issue forks. I wish that Drupal.org just lets you create a branch instead of having to create a separate repository for each issue fork, because branches would meet the 80% use case and be way less complicated, but they do it as a full full fork so that people can truly collaborate, like multiple people can collaborate on the repository that's created from the issue fork. But it does give you tons of power. Like you can just use your issue fork, indefinitely if it doesn't get accepted in, and you don't want to like split it into a different module. So yeah, even if your patch is not accepted, nor is there any way given to build on the module, you can fork the module and then maintain your own copy, which you can do as an issue fork, or if they're never going to let it in, you can actually like create your own project, rename it. All right. So, when you identify problems or add solutions to another module, you always start in the issue queue. You post it. This is just an old example that David Valdez submitted for one of our client projects way back, and just laying out the problem. And usually by the time you've written all that, like you've sort of figured out how to fix something, and so you can just provide the patch or the issue fork right away, and that's what David did. But that strategy is not without risks. David was made a maintainer of that module, Comment Notify, and subsequently routinely fixed all kinds of issues there himself. But becoming a maintainer of a module that you contributed a little bit to is much better for everyone than making your own module with duplicate functionality. You're still getting more support from the community, and people are finding things in the same spot. All right. So how not to have to make a whole module? Be a part of something bigger, but not as big as all of Drupal. So some sub-ecosystems in Drupal, commerce. You don't have to write your whole online store. Maybe you're just going to make one plugin for there. ECA event condition action, that's an alternative to writing code, but you can also write a little bit of code that works in the ECA ecosystem. So I needed the ability to done a couple of contributions to ECA, but one was the node access system in Drupal. It didn't have ECA didn't have any hookups to that, so I wrote the events, conditions, and actions to do that, and then I could click together and configure it. Extra field is sort of a developer helper module, and that lets you, that means, in modules like that, there's several, but that means you don't have to write all the boilerplate for how to get a pseudo field to show up on the display in the listing. And then Search API is another huge ecosystem that can often make sense to contribute a small piece to, rather than trying to rebuild it all yourself. All right, so to become a co-maintainer, there's a really good guide to co-maintaining modules. All of these links are in a blog post, which has a really short URL that I believe I share at the end of this, and if not, I will write it out. So, other way of not having to write an entire module, even though it's technically going to be an entire module, but it's going to be the 2-file kind of module instead of 25 files. So look for opportunities to plug in, literally look for plugins in the source/plugin of whatever modules you are operating in the vicinity of. Doing your own module by extending an existing plugin or copying or modifying an existing plugin is probably the highest impact to effort ratio of any kind of module you're going to build. So an example is the Better Exposed Filters links filter module. So I sort of include in the Search API ecosystem facets and Better Exposed filters, and BF links filter is a Better Exposed filters plugin that's about 250 lines of code altogether, mostly JavaScript. what it does is adds a filter at the top of the list of facets. So if you go to the question set, the list of facets in the question set, and type tech, it will only show you the two that have tech in the word. And how it was done was making a plugin. So the location of the file is the name of the module, then /source. All modern Drupal object-oriented code is going to go in /source, and that's what you look for in modules you're borrowing from too. /plugin, /better exposed filters. And so that second one there, the first part is the name of our module. The second one there is the name of the module we're extending. So that's going to be in its namespace. So there's a kind of plugin called Better Exposed Filters that the Better Exposed Filters module provides. So we are, in our own module, we are providing a Better Exposed Filters plugin. And then we're saying to use the Better Exposed Filters links plugin. And so when we're saying we're going to use it, that's how we're able to easily override it. So that use statement ends in links. That's the namespace in which it is brought into our module. And so we can extend that existing Better Exposed links, Better Exposed filter plugin. The type of plugin is Better Exposed Filter. The specific plugin from that type of plugin that we're extending is called links. And so we just extend it so we get all of its functionality for free. And then we can just add on the additional options we want. So minimum number of facets before we show the text filter, initial number that's shown, and this is all just riffing on their kind of configuration that was already there. So like I just looked at like what that links plugin had in their default configuration, and I extended. So the main thing really to note here, other than like we're just looking at other code and adding our own additions to it, is that the parent : is what you will use often when you are extending other classes. Like if you don't put anything in at all, like your class is just identical to theirs. And if you don't want to override a method like default configuration, you can use, fully override it. You can use parent, so you're going to get all of the default configuration that the links plugin returns, and we're adding on these three more options. And then other than that, just the JavaScript just goes and looks at that. So the heart of the presentation, how to figure out how to make a module. We already went when to make a module. You've identified to the best of your ability that there's definitely not something out there that does what you want to do. I don't personally advocate introspection at this point, trying to figure out why you're trying to do something no one else has done. No, you're about to fill in a missing piece that the world needs. Manifest that love by stealing and keeping stealing. So, another quick example. You'll see around in Drupal all over the place these little things that let you do something related to the context that's on there. So, if you're on the block page, you can add content block. And if you decide your module should have one of those button links that you see at the top right of a bunch of pages in Drupal's administration pages, you don't even need to know that they are called action links and find a tutorial on making them. You can just go look in the code of a module has them. and grep for the label and steal the code around it. And if you don't know exactly which module is providing it because it's coming from core, you just can grep all of Drupal core. So I really do advocate for grep. This is a command line search capability. Even when I'm using a fully ID for everything else, I just fall back to grep on the command line when looking for text in a file, because I know it's not going to screw up. Like when you have an ID, you're never certain if it's indexed everything in your vendor directory, everything in the Drupal core. Just a little, just flaky enough that like I fall back to the command line for this. And yeah, grep to search everything and not care about cases -n, hi, capital HIR, lowercase s. But that'll be in most examples of how to grep. All right, and so we see all these places where it's used. A whole ton of it's in tests, which is generally not the code that you want to steal from until you're adding your own test, but it can also give you a good context of how something is used. But in this case, we can really just grab the first the first listing there, the block_content.links.action.yaml file, and we're realizing that we don't even need true code. We just need to do a YAML file like this to get it. So we look at what they had, and they have the root name, that's where it should show up. The root name, which is what it should, where the button should go. And then the appears on, which is the routes where it should show up. And it's further using a whole class, and we can then go look at that class. So a lot of the action links will not need the class. This one's doing a little bit more, and we can follow that class. So anything in the Drupal namespace is just telling you that it's going to be it could be in core, it could be contrib, or it could be your custom module. So you do have to know that if it's in the Drupal namespace, in this case, we know where it is because we found the file, so we can expect this to be next to it. But at Drupal, like I said, you go look in source src folder for the module it's in, and it does say the name of the module right there, block content. So you're looking in block content/source, and then after source will be plugin, menu, local action, and then finally the file name, block content, add local action. All right, so we're starting to touch on what are basically the building blocks of Drupal, which are the things that you're going to put in your module when you want to modify what Drupal is doing. So there are APIs, which includes the routing API, entity API, form API that we've already looked at, configuration API, a whole ton of API. Services, tons of modern Drupal is done in services that you can bring in or make your own services. Path alias .manager, put that one in because they renamed it a couple times, so that's the new name. Database service, entity type .manager, that's where you get information about content types. It's a very common one to use. And then plugins, which you've also looked at a few times. So block is a common plugin that most of the examples of how to use plugins will be about blocks. Field widget plugin, field formatter plugin, filter plugin, and then what I call hacksaws and adapter kits, less in the building block side, but more to touch things that are already there. Hooks, form alter, entity type view alter, the event subscribers and route subscribers, which are more modern ways of doing hooks in modern Drupal, and then plugins again, because you get to override and alter little pieces, and services again, because you're reaching in and changing it. And technically, even altering a route, like the route subscriber I put differently, altering a route is done with an event subscriber, but there's an entire route subscriber interface overlaying this, extending event subscribers. So it's worth treating it as its own system. You never have to directly interact with the event subscribers when you're working with route subscribers. This is all about defining dynamic routes and altering routes, and it's much more like using the modern object-oriented program style hooks. So APIs, and we're linking all of these from the accompanying blog post, but if you go to Drupal.org, docs, develop Drupal APIs, it lists all of them. So this is for the main ones I mentioned, but there is a cast of dozens of well-defined APIs. Form API, that's where you will learn the available form hooks that we used in the prelude. The configuration API, cheat code there is to extend config form base, and if you just search for settings form, grep for settings form, you'll find tons of examples of on a code base with a lot. This is especially in contrib. So if you grep the other contrib modules to steal from for your own, you can see how they all define settings forms by using sort of a helper class, this config form base, so that your settings form doesn't have to do all as much work as a regular form. And services, path alias.manager, database entity type.manager, and you can see all the core services. There are hundreds of services by looking at the core.services.yaml file in your local code base, or more conveniently on api.drupal.org, where it links to more information. So you can use dependency injection preferably, or you can just grab services more procedurally by doing Drupal : service and the name of the service. And now you have the power of all of these different services Drupal uses all over right in your own module. A few super common services even have shortcut methods. You have to read and write to the database so much that Drupal just had a Drupal : database. But it's exactly the same as Drupal : service database. They just did a slightly quicker one for ones they know people are going to have to use really often. So the dependency injection is way easier now with auto wiring. I do recommend it. Dependency injection, the main benefits are easier to test, easier for another module to potentially modify what a service is doing. So it's very nice to let other modules that might be messing with things play well with your module that's trying to mess things. So I am including the use statements here. I'm really just pointing that out because a lot of the time documentation on Drupal.org and in people's blog posts do not include the use statements, and your code will not work without them. If you have a good IDE, you can just sort of, you just like retype it and it'll add the use statement for you. But every time you're in an object-oriented style file, so this again is going to be going in, if your module's name example, it's in the example folder, then src source, and then if you're not in a specific plugin or something, then your namespace ends there. It's just your module name, but you need a namespace line at the top. Use statements for anything you're going to be using. So we get the database connection capability, which you pass into the constructor of our class, and the auto-wire trait, which we just use from within our class. And this just means that right in the constructor, we can just say this database equals the database we passed in, and magically in the background, Drupal is going out and getting the database service for you. All right, so fatal errors where the message is saying a class is not found and has put the namespace of your current file alongside a class you are trying to use in your file usually means you forgot a use statement. So Drupal/example, if your module name example, auto-wire trait not found, that's your clue that you need to go back and add a use statement getting the auto-wire trait class from dependency injection core capabilities. Hooks. Talked about form alter. Node insert's a big one. Entity type view alter. You're altering like an entity as it's being viewed. Pretty good documentation on Drupal.org in their creating modules section on understanding hooks. So hooks are magic portals that let any module appear in another part of Drupal and do something. More technically, a hook is tied to some part of Drupal, some sort of Drupal event, and is an opportunity for our modules to take action. There were 251 plus hooks in Drupal 7 core, and after a concerted effort in the development of Drupal 8 to remove hooks and replace them with more modern and widespread outside of Drupal programming practices such as plugins and services, there are now 290 hooks in Drupal 11, up 40 from in Drupal 7, and up 2 from the 288 hooks in Drupal 8.8. So we're still adding hooks, not removing them. To be fair, like we moved some big contributed modules like views into Drupal core, but even after that, we are still adding hooks slightly faster than deprecating and removing them. Hooks are still very much part of Drupal. And every contributed module can provide hooks to let other people hook in. And basically Drupal has accepted that and now has more modernized hooks, which is really nice. And if we have time, we have a little example at the end. Even with the new, more modern object-oriented programming style of hooks, they still basically work by naming convention. So to implement a hook, you take the hook part off the name and replace it with your module's machine name, or do it the new way, which again we'll get to the end, but you're still just using the hook name without the hook part. All right. Yeah, sorry, just another link to the resources available for this. Again, it's the main way of extending Drupal, so there's lots of documentation on hooks here. Again, links are in the blog post. Don't try to write this one down. So we talked about hook form alter, hook entity extra field. Info is a field, it's a pseudo field that site builders can use in entity view modes, which is a very common way of extending things. So you can combine entity data and format it for display, and you can replace 3 hooks involved in these with the extra field module. Like I said, it can really help to just build on another contrib module that's trying to smooth off some of the rough edges of developing in Drupal. But all of the hooks, where I got my count from, is in the hooks group of Drupal Chorus API. And so Drupal.org inadvertently for quite a while sort of treated 8.2 as the end-all be-all of Drupal, and this has been fixed, but search engines are still slightly more likely to take you to 8.2 than 11.x. So just remember when you're looking at a piece of documentation, it lists on Drupal.org. It lists all the other things that are available, and you can just open it up, and you can just switch to 11.x. I usually go straight to 11.x, even if I'm developing for Drupal 10, because 99% of the time it's going to work, and it's the more modern. So I'm actually supposed to end pretty soon, so people can get between, especially since I'm presenting the next session. But Bonus tip: don't bother to support older versions. In your info file, you can do 10.2. A lot of good stuff came in 10.2, so this is exact line is common right now. And if you're making a new module, you'd not be excluding many people. You wouldn't be excluding anyone by starting with this. But you can feel free to exclude more people, and just so like I have to admit, I was showing you the past with the example of the form alter. But if you make your core version requirement 11.2 and above, you can use the modern way. So again, in source/hook is where the namespace for modern hooks. So namespace is Drupal, your module name, and then hook. You have to you bring in a use statement to bring in the hook attribute. And remember the use statements, they're needed for this next part to work, but pretty cool. You have your class, and then you annotate each method with that hook attribute. And again, same thing, it's the name of the hook there. But the really cool thing about this is if you did want to have this action happen in more places, you can just add as many hook attributes above as you want. So you could do this for another content type. You could do it for Frankenstein. You could do it for Frankenstein's monster. You could do it for the edit pages in addition to the new create pages. But it's the same exact code inside. It's just a method now instead of a function. But methods is just functions. All right. Plugins, block, field widget, field former, filters. There's a great plugin API overview. Example of field formatter, which we're just going to skip over. But we've got all of this craziness. But field formatters is another really powerful way to affect how things are displayed. And there's tons of example in my module in other words, which just takes lists of information that you have in Drupal in almost any form, and the original intention was so you could do the Oxford comma after it, like this and that, but it's grown to be a lot of different things. But it's all just an additional formatter, and gives that power to every site builder instead of it being a one-off customization thing that you have to do on every site. Events spreads right subscribers. Find events with the web profiler module. Services, again, you can make your own services. Type tray icon display is a tiny module that does this with Twig extras. But learning to learn, the Drupal documentation examples module, Drupal contributed modules, Drupal core and its modules. Your debugger is key. DDEV and VS Code are easy to set up together. Drupal forms and issues, Drupal.stack exchange, the rest of the internet, and code search grep. This is the examples for developers project. This is some of the rest of the internet. Drupal.org. Drupal Planet is to keep up to date with what is going on in the Drupal world, and Drupal TV for recordings of talks at all different conferences. Like DrupalCon 2026 will be going up there soon. This talk's already there. Reading the Drupal core release notes can be really helpful. Saying the rest of the internet, search DuckDuckGo, and then if DuckDuckGo doesn't find it, you can use !G for Google results. Really quick, cheap way to get two opinions. Internet search has been going horribly downhill for a while, but there's still stuff out there. So copy or have technology copy for you. Please start with Module Builder first before going to an AI thing. This will do 90% of that with you getting more understanding out of it and it not like burning down rainforests while it copies code from places. So it handles a lot of boilerplate for you. So trying to make your module contrib-worthy, write up what you plan to do first. Your own blog post is fine, but there's an old groups.drupal Or group 2, file issues for your own modules. It helps you think through what you're planning to do. It makes features and bugs more discoverable by other people. And if you do not get to it right away, there's a chance someone else will fix it for you in a way that that they coordinate with you and you know about it. And you and anyone else who helps gets Drupal.org issue credit for that. You get no credit for contributing the actual module, although supporting organizations do. So you can, if you're solo, you can create an organization for yourself, and you can list clients as supporters. You can list employers as supporters. The credit can get spread around pretty clearly. So contribute, because I asked you to, but people may contribute to yours. Someone may even take over for you and upgrade it or improve it greatly. Another developer is coming on, probably my most used module is workflow buttons, and other people, I really thought this should exist, that instead of doing a drop down when you want to save and publish, it should just be it should be save a new draft, publish, it should just be buttons. And I made that exist, and other people are like, yeah, actually, I do like that, and are contributing to that module, and doing a better job of maintaining it than I do. And you're slightly more likely to find your own code when you need to have the same need again, instead of being like, what custom what project did I do this for? All right. So as an example of someone just adding a really cute thing, a little helper addition. It's nice that this was contributed, but also this is nice if you remember to do it when you make the module. Make sure that there's this is just a diff, but we're adding the configure link to a route. This is route showing up again. Workflow buttons.settings was one of the first contributions made to that. So how to develop while sharing code at the same time. I think this is really, really, really helpful. So the module you're working on in this case is our module TomSelect, and you just scroll down to on your module page at the very bottom. If you've made a development release, it will give you this code, which is this is an error here. Do not put the initial caret. Just 2.0.x-dev@dev is how you bring in your module, and it's actually going to clone it as Git for you. And this is probably the most important thing. Again, it's in the blog post. Adding this to a .git-config file somewhere on your OS means that modules that are cloned as HTTPS, which is the default, will use SSH when you push, which you need for your key to actually work. This has been around for forever. I did not know about it until a couple years ago. It's made it so much easier to just push to your issue forks, push to directly to the main branch of your module when you're working on it. So when you're maintaining, join the maintainers channel in Drupal Slack. A lot of very helpful people there. You sort of get access to a new level of support by being a contributor. Thank people for the contributions. Use plan issues to coordinate releases. Add test coverage step by step to make sure you don't accidentally break something. And go slowly. Don't need to do it. You can start and leave your module in sandbox mode. You do not have to make your module a full project right away. I do, but you don't have to if you don't feel comfortable throwing it out there. Yes, steal my confidence if you need it. I don't deserve it. And then, be explicit about your level of support. There's an option for this on the module page. And commit based on your own opinion. Another prolific maintainer, Sam Lara, shares that. Being a part of something bigger, part 2. This is about getting outside of Drupal. And there's a whole bunch of slides on this that we'll skip. Release, write and generate release notes. I have a simple release. Okay, release notes here. This is the Drupal-mrn-dev.dev. Really great for creating release notes for your module by looking at what commits have been made. And if you're formatting your commits the way that, if you make an issue first, the issue provides a commit message for you to use, so you can do that. Have a readme.md file. I make one that generates it from your composer.json file, just so you don't have to duplicate that basic information. Then you can add more to it. And then choose whether you're going to do Drupal security coverage or not. Generally, I think you should. It takes a few days. It's like you have to. The module has to exist for a couple of weeks, and then you can opt in. It only covers stable releases, but your module is probably not opening huge security issues, and you get more eyes on it. But do try to write secure code. There's good advice on Drupal.org, and you can get help from the security teams. So if you're part of bigger, go to camps. Dark has a show and tell, 2 p.m. Central, though we took it over a lot on other things. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. We're all human, and that's your rabbit. It's a big, wild world out there. Bite off a piece you can chew. Links for all of this and more are on the session page. And that's it. That's the link that gives you all the other links. So there's a full follow-up. One there. Any questions? Then I have to run to my next presentation on posting. Thank you.